Welcome back to the Expo. My name's Saxon Phipps, and I have the pleasure of introducing not only one of the most interesting people I know, but our fan favorite from last year's Expo, Will Hodgett. Will has previously been the creative director at GoPro. He's an incredibly interesting dude and has a very compelling story. Will, thanks again for tuning in for Year 13's Expo.
No worries. Hey guys, stoked to be here.
Mate, you were the fan favorite last year. I know you had a fair few people reach out to you afterwards about kind of hearing a bit more of your story. But for those attending here this year, can you give me a bit of background of your story, kind of, finishing school up until now, your role or what your previous roles have been with GoPro and what you're doing going into the future?
Yep. So I guess in short, for me, finishing school, I kind of took a unique pathway, I would say, where I got into filmmaking, bit in surf, bodyboarding, filmmaking, and that kind of led me down. Like I said, a unique pathway of kind of traveling the world, meeting a lot of people, getting to see like a lot of unique things, a lot of unique experiences, and eventually, through that kind of experience, ended up at GoPro in 2014, 6-7 years ago. And then kind of spent 6-7 years there and worked my way up to end up being creative director, kind of looking over the Europe, Middle East, Africa region. Which is basically kind of having fun, traveling around, filming a lot of stuff with athletes, and a lot of hard work as well, but also a really, really good time.
From memory, I think it was like a bit of a coincidence of chance that you met someone who was able to kind of help you with your career. I guess if I can take it back one step before that, how did you know that you wanted to go into kind of filmmaking? And what was a bit of your process? I know it's this kind of 10, 12, 13 years ago. Relatively unknown as an industry back then. Now it's obviously everything that we consume. How did you make that decision?
So it probably goes all the way back to high school. I think through school for me, there wasn't, I just kind of got by. There wasn't like something crazy creative about me in school or anything like that. But I did discover this kind of passion, which was filming surfing and bodyboarding with my friends on the weekend, and that kind of gave me this, I think, a sense of identity and the sense of purpose, and carried that through high school. And then basically when I finished school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I think that was a pretty confusing time. I think if I look back, I remember seeing people like, everyone going to university, and I had this feeling and this sense that kind of everyone knew what they wanted to do. And I was just kind of lost, and I was like, oh shit, like, what's going on? And then I remember like, when we were back then, we'd be watching these surfing and these bodyboarding DVDs, and you'd be seeing these guys kind of traveling around the world and, getting paid to do it, having such a good time. And I thought like, oh yeah, like, that would be pretty cool. How can I get to that? And the thing is, back then, like, there's no pathway to something like that. There's no university degree to something like that. You couldn't even look up on YouTube how to do something like that. You probably can now, but back then not. And so basically I just kind of came up with a plan, and I was thinking, okay, like this is something I really want to do. How do I do it? Okay, if we're going to get a camera, I just take it back to basics. And I kind of just created a little stepping stone plan for myself, which was laboring for a year. So I went and worked as a concreter for 1 year, which was really hard work. And then after that, saved up, bought a camera, and then basically spent the next year kind of down on the South Coast with a friend of mine who's a photographer as well. And we basically just started filming with friends, like not even professionals, just with friends. But yeah, I remember thinking it was definitely like a confusing year. And that year when I was laboring, I remember seeing other people at film school and thinking, oh, should I be doing that? And I remember seeing other people filming surfing and thinking like, oh, like kind of getting jealous in a way, that I didn't have that opportunity yet. But it kind of drove me, like every night I would go back from that laboring job and kind of like see that and be like, oh, like when I get this camera, like I'm going to show them, like I'm going to almost, this competitive thing. and I'd go home and I'd spend the nights after work kind of teaching myself, like going on YouTube, teaching myself how to edit. And, so when I did get this opportunity that I was saving up for next year, I would kind of be more prepared for it in a way.
So kind of like following something that you're interested in really led you onto the path that you've taken.
Yeah, definitely. It was just, it was what I enjoyed doing. And all I knew was when I finished school that, it was the one thing that did give me a sense of identity, and I really enjoyed it. And I had this like passionate feel for it, when you're really into a hobby or something like that. And yeah, I don't know, I just felt like if you can make this a career, like, wow, like, wouldn't it be amazing to be able to travel the world and like, get paid to do it kind of thing. Like that to me was just this like, wow, like I can't believe people do that for their job. And so, yeah, I just remember looking at that and just thinking, wow, I want to do that.
If I can rewind you there on something you were talking about, school, you never really excelled at one single subject, but is there a subject that you could say has had an impact on you, especially with your career now, obviously in multimedia and creative industries? What year 12 subject would you say has been able to like greatly benefit you and that you still kind of use into today?
Yeah, so pretty funny one. So in high school, I was actually really into history, and so into it that actually one of the things I even thought about doing after I finished school was actually going to university to study archaeology. And for me, there was just kind of two aspects of history that I really found like, fascinating and almost parallels in what I do now. And one was, so I was a massive Indiana Jones fan when I was a kid, and just seeing this guy who's like traveling around the world and like discovering artifacts and like meeting people and different cultures and stuff like that. That used to fascinate me. And for me, I always had this sense that the study of history involved adventures and traveling around and like solving problems and stuff like this. And that was something that I always found appealing. And then secondly, there's just this huge storytelling aspect in history, I think. So I would sit in history class and, you're hearing stories of all these ancient civilizations, all this kind of stuff. And for me, it was just kind of daydreaming, like you would, drift off. And I don't know, it's just fascinating, the way that all these different cultures would tell stories. And I think for me now, even still, like, my dream is always to get into a feature-length documentary filming. And when you're kind of looking at the way all these different cultures tell stories, I think it's like fascinating for me to study. And then I also actually still have this idea that when I'm 40 or 50, I'll go to university, study archaeology, and then combine the two professions and just go around the world trying to discover things and create a vlog about it or something. I don't know. So it sounds like a good retirement plan.
But it's interesting. Like as you were saying that, I was thinking about it because like history is very much so like kind of the basis of what a lot of documentaries are. That you are actually studying a period of time. There are key kind of historical figures and historical events leading up until a more modern context of it. I've never actually really thought of it like that. What's your plan now? I think you've kind of made a bit of a pivot in your career, which is obviously an interesting transition. And it's not something exclusive to just finishing high school. We're consistently going through transitions. What transition are you going through now?
Yeah, so at the moment, so leaving GoPro to kind of, I think, step back a bit. It was such a great time at GoPro, but it's also, it was a really intense kind of 24/7 job spanning over years. And I think like anything, you can get kind of drained, but also I've always been a big believer in kind of, the best moments when you're out of your comfort zone. And I think when you're somewhere for so long, you can kind of get comfortable and kind of get in this comfort zone. And for me, it just scares me a bit. Like I always want to be like a bit on edge, because for me, every big decision, every good pathway has been from out of these comfort zone situations. So for me now, it's kind of stepping back you know, a lot of reigniting the passion for filmmaking and kind of looking at like what is next. But at the same time, still working with brands, so still working with GoPro, Red Bull, and a few other athletes on projects, like individual projects, which is really cool to kind of be able to more so pick and choose and work on things that are really like projects that you're passionate about. You know, it's not that you have to do everything that GoPro's doing. It's like, okay, well, let's do this, because that's, you know, enough money to keep going, but it's what keeps you really passionate. So kind of sitting in this like bubble of thinking and planning. I really feel like I did before I started at GoPro at the moment, where it's, you know, in a scary way, you're a little bit like unsure of what's going to happen. But there's a real excitement to that as well, I think.
And what like you said it a couple of times, but what does drive you?
What drives me, it's the same thing as when I was 15 in school, you know, like this feeling back then of out filming with friends, like in the surf, and this like creativity and this fun moment, you know, and that's what I'm trying to replicate on every shoot I go on now, like that same passionate moment where you and your friends are having a good time, and you're just not thinking about anything else. And I don't know, luckily for me, I can still get that 15 years later through my work, you know, which is really cool. But that's what drives me. It's like trying to chase this like same feeling that you had when you were a kid, when you were being creative and you had all this passion and, you know, working with your friends, but now it's like working with other people, but you're trying to form the same kind of feeling, you know. It's, yeah.
So it's a good drive and it's a good fuel to have. How do you kind of how do you motivate people around you? You know, if you think back, you just said, you know, 15 years ago, you're still chasing that same feeling that you are today. And today you've got a lot more responsibility in your role. You're obviously managing more people. How do you inspire someone around you or the team around you into your vision, or to have that same level of passion in your work?
Yeah, so I think what I did learn at GoPro is that everyone has, like, and yourself included, myself included, everyone has strengths and everyone has weaknesses. And I think I realized my strengths were building relationships with people and kind of like bringing people together on a project. Like I was just saying, like you're trying to recreate that same energy that you had with your friends when you're 15. Like you never want to lose that passion, because like you never want to lose that energy, because honestly, that's the same energy you're trying to recreate later. So I learned strengths and I learned what weaknesses are as well. And I learned how to kind of build a team around that. You know, you have a football team, right? Like you have guys, great strikers, but they can't defend. And then you have defenders who can't strike. So it's the same in a creative production. You know, you want to plug different players who have different strengths in each position, and that's going to make the team kind of work better. And I always kind of try and plan teams so I have to do the least amount of motivating as possible on location. So I think about, you know, dynamics and, you know, who's friends with who and all these kind of things that it's a lot of psychology almost, that you're trying to plan these teams. Which athlete, does this athlete already have a relationship with this filmer or this producer, and bring that all in. And then creating a vibe and a passion and a good energy on location on a production, I think is, I don't know, for me, I've always just tried to make it as normal as possible. So not talking to the athlete about their sport or anything like that. I would usually put an extra day at the beginning of the production just for everyone to hang out and kind of be friends and do whatever kind of thing. I think I just try and make it as normal and as human as possible, because at the end of the day, like, yeah, everyone just wants to relax and be human. And then secondly, I always really try and get the athlete totally invested in the project, because as soon as the athlete's kind of like excited or invested in a project, then they see the passion in you and they want to kind of like, you know, they want to make it something cool. Whereas if you go there and you kind of like bowing down to an athlete or something like that, that's what they're used to from the media kind of every day, and they'll respond to it how they respond to the media, which is kind of like vroom. So yeah, that for me, like building a personal relationship with the athlete and getting them invested in the project kind of thing.
You've touched on some really, really interesting kind of like, whether you call them soft skills or enterprise skills or leadership qualities, in terms of like being able to explain the mission, or not even the mission, like the why we want to do something, and the importance of it, and then having people believe in it. How hard is that to be able to make people believe in you? And I think that you're quite a cool story and cool case of someone who wasn't too sure what they were going to do. You kind of had your own passion, but it's hard to find people who are going to believe in your passion. How have you found managing that and kind of taking some of your wins, but also acknowledging some of your losses?
Yeah, it's hard. Like there's definitely, you're going to have challenges along the way for sure. I think for me, like I've definitely always had challenges of self-doubt. I think that stems from taking a unique path where, I can't say that I've been in meetings and calls and meeting people where I can't say that I have a university degree, or like, I don't have this thing to fall back on where like, you should trust me because I have this degree, like I don't have that card. So all I have is myself and being present and talking to people, So I've had challenges where I've definitely sat in rooms, especially when I was younger. And I think every young filmmaker or creator is going to have it, when people kind of look down at you and don't believe in your ideas and think like, yeah, who are you kind of thing, like you don't have anything to fall back on at that point in your life. So self-doubt starts creeping in, and I think it's a really challenging time. And for me, I was lucky enough to have really great mentors around me at my workplace who kind of helped me develop this self-belief in my work. And I think I was really lucky, like I had that before GoPro, and then at GoPro, they were a pretty awesome company in a sense where they really kind of believed in people and believed in the development of people. And yeah, I was always really passionate about my ideas. And then after about a year or two of sitting in these meeting rooms and people telling me that they weren't good, I basically started like fighting for them and being like, well, yes, they are. And, I got to a point where I would have some like senior people tell me, oh, we don't believe in this idea. We're not going to give you budget for this idea, blah, blah, blah. And I believed in the idea so much that I sat there and I looked at them and I said, okay, well, I'm going to take 2 weeks holiday and pay for my own flights over to this location. I'm going to do this shoot with this athlete anyway on my holiday. That's how much I believe in it. And kind of put them in a position where they can't say no. Like, if you, and they would be like, oh, if you believe in it that much, then yes, go and do it. And that starts off really small with like, your first shoots are these really small ones. It's like small budget, small team. And you fight for that, and then you do that and you're ready, there's an opportunity there. And you're ready for that opportunity. You go there, you do a good job, and they look at that and they think, oh, okay, he is ready for something like that. And then, yeah, and that's all the way up, bigger and bigger. It was always kind of like that.
That's really cool advice, that you've got to kind of, I think at the fundamental level, like really back yourself and not be afraid of failure, and kind of taking ownership of kind of your ideas and your passions. And I think it's a great old saying that when you're told it can't be done, it can be done. And sometimes you just need to be able to go out there and get your idea on paper and just use that as the foundations. For someone that's, that would be listening now, what would be your advice to someone who firstly wants to either get into the industry, or actually, yeah, we'll go that way, to get into the industry, but also what do you think the future of kind of multimedia and video is going to be?
Yeah, so I would say advice. I think I said something similar last year, but it becomes truer and truer every year. Is basically, if you're a young creative right now, wanting to get in the media industry, anything like that, like I would say to them, wow, you should know your value as a young creative thinker, because more and more in brands, you know, trends are moving so fast with social media and all this kind of stuff, and with content, that like everyone who's sitting in those brands, I guarantee you, is like wishing that they had a little 18-year-old kid next to them, just telling them like what is cool today kind of thing, because they're sitting in like 5 meetings every day trying to figure it out. So that is like a big thing. Like, definitely understand your value of being connected with that content, and make sure you are kind of like following up on trends and keeping connected with that kind of stuff. Yeah, that would be my biggest tip. I forgot the question again. What was the second part?
The other one is where's the industry going? Where do you see the future of kind of multimedia and content and video and film really going?
Yeah, it's hard to say at the moment, to be honest. I think obviously like short form content, interactive content. I think I get really fascinated by a lot of the live stuff at the moment. You know, like live streaming through like guys playing games or like activities, like whatever it is. I think that's really fascinating at the moment. Yeah, the future of media, if anyone knows, just send me an email, because I'd be stoked.
No, and I tend to agree with you. I think back, 10 years ago, that there was no real, I think Instagram had just kind of really popped its head up, and there was no Facebook video, there was no TikTok, there was no Snapchat, but that kind of, and you see how well, we've got the Inspired Unemployed Boys speaking for the Expo, and you see how well that they've done with, kind of just leveraging an idea and creating their own brand and using content that is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's transcending, you're right, it's transcending from what we used to watch and we used to attach to, is that authenticity. And now it's just coming through social media, Yeah, and that's why, I mentioned teamwork before, but there's also that aspect of it where, having that young creative come through, but then also pairing with someone else who knows like that authenticity world kind of thing. Like there's a lot of pairings and teamwork around social media, I think, that are really valuable.
You spoke of so like teamwork, creative thinking, critical thinking, there's some leadership qualities. For someone who doesn't have a qualification, a formalized qualification, what skills do you use mostly in your process and in your work, you reckon?
So I think for me, like if I break it down, there's kind of, I guess, 3 stages of what I do. There's the pre-production, which is all the planning before it. There's a production, which is when you're on location filming the actual thing, and there's the post-production, which is when you're back editing. I think each stage has a different skill set. To quickly break it down, in pre-production, for me personally, if we're storyboarding, thinking about ideas, like I like to firstly kind of be by myself, music, thinking, writing, that kind of thing. And then for me, number one is always trying to, once you have your team, getting in a room together, starting the process together, and like really trying to collaborate. I think there's a quote that, I don't know, like the best ideas kind of come from like almost like accidental collaboration as well, which I'm a big believer in. So that's like meeting someone over dinner, over drinks, something like that, or being somewhere, wherever, talking to someone and kind of having this accidental collaboration. And that's how I think a lot of like my best ideas have come as well, or being with an athlete, having dinner somewhere, no expectation to talk about an idea, but you come up with something. And then eventually bringing that into a room, brainstorming with people and collaborating, like going through that process. And then I like to take that back in and out of that into myself, kind of keep storyboarding, and then bring it back to the group, and we all talk about it. So that whole, I think that's like a 50-50 individual and collaborative experience for me in the pre-production phase. And there's a lot of teamwork around, obviously, the legal and setting up the production side of it too. In the production side, so when we're on location, I think skill set wise, like for me, obviously, like you have your camera work. That's something that I feel like I do less and less of now, but it's definitely like something I love doing because it's how I started. And that's like, your technical role where you grow up practicing, learning your cameras. Then I think there's directing, which I do a lot more of now, which is that leadership aspect. And to me, that's like being, I don't want to say babysitter, but something like that. It's like having a vision, and that's your vision, and you want to make that come good. And it's about making that team kind of perform to create your vision or your team's vision or whatever it is. And I think a skill set for that is kind of almost a hard one to teach. I think it's something that you naturally have to just go through the process, and organically it will come to you. And then other skill sets on location, I think there's a lot of logistics and stuff's always going wrong, and kind of not panicking, and this kind of mindset to have. And same thing, I think that comes from just experience, and also I think traveling a lot kind of helps with stuff like that, when you're used to experiences that you weren't expecting, and being prepared, like unprepared for something, but not panicking and making it happen. I think that for me is always a key thing for the people I have on a production. And then thirdly, post-production, which is a lot of, for me, editing. That is a lot of late nights and a little bit of whiskey. No, I think editing for me is actually, and people never believe me, but editing for me is actually the favorite part of the whole process for me, almost, because you're kind of sitting back and everything's there, and it's like you're painting, you're pulling all these visuals together, and you're creating this like thing that you talked about in a room 6 months ago or 2 months ago or whatever it is, and you're kind of pulling it all together. And it's almost the most creative part of the process for me. And it's, yeah, I think the skill set for that is just, that's what I taught myself off YouTube 15 years ago, like just watching videos, I used to watch music videos and watch people then break them down and like how they edited this and that. And then I would take like clips off YouTube, pull them apart, and then try and re-edit them to like look like the music video. So this like kind of obsessive like learning thing, but I think that's what editing is. Like anyone who's into editing, I think they were watching this, they will obviously know that editing is a technical skill, and that's one that you really practice by repetition, 10,000 hours kind of thing. Yeah.
Mate, that's probably some of your best advice. I think that breaking that down, that whole process is of incredible value. So thanks for sharing that. I know your time is precious, and we're just about to wrap up, but Will, what would be your one piece of advice to any budding young person out there who's, umming and ahhing about what to do, or doesn't know how to actually identify to, take it on, that they might be a creative person who's kind of withheld within their friend circles, or just isn't sure? What would be your piece of advice?
Yeah, if you genuinely believe it's something you want to do, be prepared for those open door opportunities, and always, if your gut's telling you it's like this could be the right pathway, then go with your gut, and yeah, have fun. That's pretty much it.
I think you summed up yourself pretty well there. Will, once again, you were the fan favorite from last year's Expo, and I really do appreciate your time. I know you're incredibly busy managing time between here and Europe at the moment. So thank you for joining us once again for Year 13's Expo.
No worries. Thanks, guys.